There are only a handful of fighters who have the privilege of being considered the greatest of all time in the kickboxing world. Today we're going to look closely, very closely at the list of candidates and figure out who it is. Because these guys are all amazing fighters, no question, but there can only be one GOAT. I'm going to be upfront and honest, guys. If you're in the kickboxing world, you probably already know my name. I'm a 6-time pro kickboxing world champion. I've held the Glory belt twice. I've held the Hero Legends belt from China, and I currently hold the Bellator kickboxing world title. Now, even though I've accomplished all that, and at one point I was considered #1 in the world at featherweight, I am not in the conversation to be the GOAT of kickboxing. I do, however, get very frustrated when I see what many people's picks are for the GOAT, and this is a very prestigious title to hold, and really if somebody is going to have that handed to them, have that title given to them, they really have to have earned it. So today you're going to get the opinion of a pro kickboxing world champion about who the real GOAT is. Now let's talk candidates. First up, Semmy Schilt. Record of 43-6. Now he has to be in the conversation because he is the only fighter, I believe, to have held the K1 World Grand Prix title 4 times. And I believe he almost won those all back to back. So there was a time period there where he was almost untouchable. Now he did suffer some very close controversial decisions. One to, I believe a few actually, to Peter Arts, one to Hong Man Choi, and a knockout against Badr Hari, which I believe he came back and avenged. Now, as I said, no question, he is amazing. He dominated for a long period of time. But my one sort of issue with him is he was so much bigger than his opposition. There was no weight class, no max out for the heavyweight, so he was towering above these guys. And I remember reading that some of the fighters who were, probably 50 pounds less, had maybe 6 inches less, saying even kicking this guy's legs hurt their shins. So that just goes to show you the size difference. And Semmy Schilt, amazing, no question, but if he would not have been so big, would have his technique and his stamina and his power all being equivalent with the other fighters? I'm not 100% sure about that. And I might be wrong, but I think that takes him out of the conversation for the GOAT. Next up, Peter Arts, absolute legend in the sport. Many people will put him down as the GOAT just because he was just such a machine. He fought so many guys. His record was 106 wins and 35 losses. Now again, there was a period there, I believe he won 3 World Grand Prix titles very close together, might have even been back to back. I'm not 100% sure about that. But I think one of the reasons that he is often considered the GOAT is he was almost a pioneer for the sport, and people just loved him. They loved his high kick style, they loved what he brought to the ring. But I think for Peter, he was more of one of the first generation fighters who was doing very well until some of the newer guys came in. And then it became a little more difficult for him because #1, he was getting a little older, but #2, as new generations enter the sport, the older ones generally don't do as well. These new guys have just evolved. So he's definitely in the conversation for the GOAT. We'll touch back at the end and see if he is my choice and the winner of this conversation. Next up, in his early 20s, Tenshin, I believe it's Kawa, with a perfect record of 36-0. Now, as you guys know, in fight sports, quite often the heavier weight class get much more notoriety. And because Tenshin is, I believe, down in the 120 pound range, maybe has moved up to 130 pound, he didn't get quite as much notoriety, and he never really will, just because of that smaller weight. Just like Demetrius Johnson in MMA didn't get as much of the limelight that he should have, because in my opinion, he is the best MMA fighter ever. But Tenshin, with his perfect record, his crazy power at his weight class, and his phenomenal technique, his showmanship, he is definitely in the conversation for the GOAT. But here's my trouble with him right now. He is new to the sport still. And personally, and just honestly, I don't know that much about the opponents he's fighting. I don't know if they are the best in the world, if there are other guys out there, because I just haven't honestly been keeping track of that whole K1 scene over there. So while he very well may be one of the future, or if not the future GOAT, if he can maintain that perfect record, all through his 20s. He's not there yet, in my opinion, but spectacular, no doubt. Next up, the current king of heavyweight kickboxing, Rico Verhoeven. He has a record of 56-10, and he has been on a winning streak. If you look at his Glory winning streak, it's been a very, very long time. He has looked untouchable in Glory since his loss, I believe, to Semmy Schilt back in 2012. He's fought pretty much everybody there is to fight, but there's a couple issues with his record. And number one being that he went to China and he fought somebody and lost there. And why Glory has never brought that guy in to have the rematch with Rico, I'm not sure, because I believe that loss, plus his 2 fights with Badr, where they weren't 100% convincing wins, and you rack that up with a couple losses earlier in his career. He is one of the all-time greats for heavyweight kickboxing. Is he the best ever of all time? I would really struggle with calling him the GOAT, but fantastic, fantastic athlete. Amazing what he's done for Glory. Just a superstar for the sport, no doubt. Next up, since we were just talking about him, Badr Hari, 106 wins, 14 losses. Now, Badr seems to be the fan favorite to be considered the GOAT, and I understand why. He's so fun to watch. You never know. It's basically he's going to get knocked out or he's going to knock the other guy out. That's sort of the style that he brings, even though the knockout doesn't always come. You're always on the edge of your seat knowing just like that the fight could be done. Stylistically very solid, but my issue with him is the fact that he has taken some losses, 10 of them, a couple were by disqualification. But when you look back on his career, number one, he's lost to Rico. Number two, he lost to Remy twice, once by disqualification, but the first time he lost, it was legitimate. Remy was just so good at keeping that guard up, not getting flustered, not getting drawn into the firefight, and that right there, I think, just makes that case for the fact that Badr might not be the greatest of all time. I know a lot of fans aren't going to like hearing that. They love him. You know, love your favorite fighter, but you don't have to call him the greatest of all time. I believe the greatest of all time has to be consistent. You have to consistently perform. You can't have 3 good fights and then 1 bad one, and 3 really good fights and a couple bad ones. Badr is an amazing fighter, but he does have those times where he doesn't show up or something just doesn't look quite on point, and just mentally he just sort of loses it. And even if you're losing by disqualification, you are still not winning the fight. You have to win the fight to be the GOAT. Next up, Giorgio Petrosyan from Italy, record of 103. Those are wins, 103 wins, 2 losses, 2 draws. That's a pretty crazy record, especially since I heard that the loss, one of them, and the draws were very close and controversial. So really he has the 1 loss to, I'm drawing a blank right now who the loss was to. It was in Glory in an 8-man tournament, and he ended up getting knocked out. 1 knockout loss. He recovered from it. He came back. He's been on a crazy, crazy winning streak. Now, one of the reasons his name doesn't come up as much when you're talking about the GOAT is in the past, and even currently, he's not a big knockout artist. They don't come as often as maybe some of those other guys like Badr or Peter Arts or Tension. He's not a big knockout artist, but the record speaks for itself. And one of the big things which really stands out about Petrosyan is who has he not fought? The only big name that really pops into my head that he hasn't fought was Masato back in the day, and honestly I don't think that was a fight that Masato even wanted. And of course a rematch with Bercow because they had a draw, again controversial, but that would be lovely to see. Giorgio is one of the few fighters in the world who's collected, I think, pretty much all the belts. I mean, I have the Hero Legends belt up there, he had it. I have a Glory belt, he had it. I have a Bellator kickboxing belt, he should have had that one. It wasn't a loss, it's just they changed last minute the decision to, instead of doing 5 rounds, they did 3, and they didn't call it a title fight, but he did win that. He beat a very respectable opponent, so he could easily have had that belt as well. He had the K1 belt multiple times, and now he currently, number 5, has the 1 FC belt. Amazing. Plus a whole slew of other belts that he has. I can't even keep track of all the titles he's won. So 100% he has to be considered, even if you don't love him, he has to be considered for that title of the GOAT. The next fighter who has to be included in this list is Bercow. He has close to 300 fights. Now, yes, lots of them are Muay Thai fights, but many, many are kickboxing, and he was at the top of K1 for so long. Now, within that, the Muay Thai and the kickboxing, he only has 24 losses. Personally, on the list of everybody I've included, he is my favorite fighter, sort of the biggest role model I had through the growing stages of my career. Now, because of the fight style in K1, you are going to take losses. It happens in tournaments. Nobody's going to go undefeated. But one of the reasons I'd shy away from being able to call him the greatest is he took a KO loss to Sato, not Masato, but Sato, the tall, lanky Japanese dude, actually KO'd him with body knees and a headshot. And in my opinion, he did take a loss to Masato in the opening fight of, I think it was the 2007 K1 Max tournament. So there's always that sort of controversy about who was really better, Masato or Bercow. Very close, very, very open to argument. As I mentioned, definitely my favorite fighter on this list. Will I give him the status of the GOAT? We'll see in a second. Now, there are many, many other people that we could bring into this conversation. Guys like Raymond Deckers, but he's more of a Muay Thai legend, and even though he did kickboxing, that's really Muay Thai where he made his name. But like I said, many other people, Andy Sauer, Albert Kraus, Masato, but I had my reasons for not including them in this conversation. So I think the group of candidates we have is a good reflection of the guys who really, really deserve to be in this conversation. Andy Risti, it just came to me. That's who knocked out Giorgio Petrosyan. Moving back on. So guys, at the end of the day, if I had to pick one person who was the GOAT, it's not even a question for me. It is upfront, it's clear. There shouldn't be any discussion about it, no arguments. It is, without a doubt, Giorgio Petrosyan. His record speaks for itself. He has beat all the opponents that are out there. It's one of those fights when I had the Glory Kickboxing and he was a weight class above and one of those big names, and when he came into Bellator, people were asking, oh, Gabriel, are you going to move up in weight and fight Giorgio? And I just went right away, no thought, didn't have to really consider it. No, I'm not going up in weight to fight this guy. Even if he was at my weight, he's so hard to beat. Very untouchable, very dangerous fighter, and with him having another 10, 15 pounds of muscle, there's no way I'm going into that fight thinking it's going to go well for me. He is just that good that even a world champion like myself knows that I will not be able to handle that guy. So you can agree, you can't, but I'm telling you, Giorgio Petrosyan is the #1 fighter, the #1 kickboxer in the world. He probably will be for a very, very long time. If you guys don't agree with me, throw a comment below. Let me know who you think deserves this title. And if you haven't taken the time to check out his fights, make sure you do. It's just, it's a chess game. It's poetry in motion. He is just on top of his opponent. His brain is firing so fast. It's very rare to see him get caught with a shot. His angles are superb. His technique is flawless. Again, he might not be your favorite fighter. He might not put on the most exciting fights, but he's somebody like Floyd Mayweather, like George St. Pierre, who can really, really pick their opponents apart and get the job done. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this breakdown of who I think the #1 fighter in the world was. Would I like to have had that title? Of course, but I'm happy being considered one of the greatest featherweights of all time. That's enough for me. But of course, I'm going to keep fighting, keep getting those wins. Take a moment, guys, share this video around. Some other people might be interested in this conversation. If you haven't already, get subscribed. And as always, train hard, and I'll see you back here soon for another video.